What if I told you that almost 2,000 years ago, someone already saw what we're experiencing today? That a man, isolated on an island, witnessed in vision something so advanced that not even the words of his time could describe it. He was speaking of a global system, of a brand that would define who could buy, sell, and who would be excluded. A prophecy written in the book of Revelation, which many call the most enigmatic vision in the Bible, but which perhaps now begins to make sense. Stay with me until the end, because what you discover now may surprise you and perhaps make you look at today's world with different eyes. John, the author of Revelation, was exiled on the island of Patmos when he wrote of the coming time when no one could buy or sell except one who had the mark of the beast. For centuries, this phrase was interpreted symbolically as a spiritual metaphor for the corruption of faith. But what if it wasn't just that? What if John had seen something beyond his understanding, something that is only now, with the advancement of technology, beginning to reveal itself? Imagine trying to describe artificial intelligence, digital currencies, and global control using only the vocabulary of 2,000 years ago. How would you do it? Perhaps you'd speak of a mark on the hand or forehead, an image that comes to life and speaks, a system where humans lose their free will in the name of survival. It sounds like science fiction, but it's exactly what João wrote. Today, we live in an era of total digitalization. Physical money is disappearing. Transactions are controlled by invisible systems. Digital identities are becoming mandatory. And artificial intelligence is capable of monitoring every movement, every word, every purchase. And the further we advance, the closer we get to what the Bible called global control. Is this a coincidence, or the fulfillment of an ancient prophecy? Have you noticed how, little by little, we're being conditioned to accept that everything must be digital, connected, and traceable? The promise is of convenience, security, and progress. But behind the convenience lies a silent machine turning, and when it's complete, who will truly be in control? João envisioned a system that would decide who could participate in the economy and who would be excluded from it. Today, we are building a world in which a simple code, a chip, a digital authorization can define whether someone exists or ceases to exist economically. What once seemed merely a religious allegory is now a technological reality unfolding before our eyes. And you don't have to be religious to sense that something big is about to happen. Governments, corporations, and central banks talk about digital currencies and total control. And at the same time, artificial intelligence is learning to manage the economy, predict behavior, and even suggest punishments for those who step out of line. João couldn't comprehend this, but he described it with frightening precision. A power that dominates nations, speaks through images, and demands submission. What's most striking is that the more humanity seeks freedom through technology, the more it seems to be heading toward digital slavery. And this tension between progress and prophecy is what makes this topic so disturbing. John's warning wasn't just spiritual. It was a wake-up call for a generation that would live through the height of technological power. A generation that would trade free will for convenience and faith for dependence on a system that promises everything, but exacts a steep price. And perhaps, without realizing it, we are already that generation. In the next few minutes, you'll understand why so many scholars believe the Mark of Revelation isn't a symbol, but a code, a modern form of control already being implemented, and what this reveals about the true purpose behind the digital revolution shaping the world. If all this makes you reflect, if at any point in these words something made you stop and consider that the world is, indeed, changing before your eyes, then perhaps this message is for you, because nothing being said here is just theory. These are signs, events, silent transformations that are already shaping our daily lives. And understanding this is the first step to becoming not just another spectator, but someone awake, aware, and prepared for what lies ahead. And that's why I truly want to invite you to join this conversation. Tell me in the comments, what do you feel when you hear about these ancient prophecies that seem to be coming true now, in the digital age? Do you believe John truly saw our time? Or do you think there's still more to be revealed? Your opinion is important, not only because it enriches the dialogue, but because when you share your thoughts, you help others awaken as well. If this topic resonates with you, if something deep within you feels there's a profound truth behind these words, then please leave a like. This may seem like a simple gesture, but it's what makes this message reach more people, what makes the algorithm deliver this video to those who also need to hear it. This is how, together, little by little, we form a community of people seeking to understand the times in which they live. And if this is your first time here, I invite you to subscribe to the channel, because this is just the beginning. With each new video, we delve deeper into the connections between prophecies and technological advancement, between faith and the future that has already begun. When you subscribe, you not only follow this journey, but also become a part of it, part of a generation determined not to close its eyes to what is happening. Your presence, your comment, your like, it all makes a difference. It's what keeps this message alive and expands the reach of this reflection. Because the truth is, no one can awaken the world alone, but together, we can echo what many prefer to ignore. And what comes next will deepen this revelation even further. Because if John saw the coming of global control, other prophets also saw the same scenario in different forms. And when we put these pieces together, the picture that emerges is even more disturbing. John was no ordinary man. He was the last of the apostles still alive when the Roman Empire decided to silence him. Exiled to the small island of Patmos, far from everything and everyone, he was condemned to isolation because of his faith. Imagine the scenario: an elderly, solitary man, surrounded by an endless sea, living among rocks and storms, and right there, in that place of absolute silence, he had the most impressive visions in human history. It was in the midst of solitude that John began to see what he called revelation. He saw kings and empires rise and fall, saw human power corrupted by ambition and idolatry. But he also saw something no mind of the time could comprehend: a new form of power, impersonal, cold, and absolute. He described what he called the beast that comes up out of the sea, an entity that would dominate peoples, languages, and nations. Many thought John was speaking of a tyrant or a specific government. But what if what he saw wasn't a man, but a system? Now I want to go even deeper into this subject. When John wrote about the beast, he used the words and images available to him. He spoke of horns, crowns, wild beasts, and images that came to life. But what lies behind these symbols may be much more literal than it appears. Think about it. If someone 2,000 years ago had a vision of satellites orbiting the Earth, of drones flying overhead, of screens projecting artificial faces and voices, how would they describe it? To John, everything he saw seemed like a mixture of flesh and metal, of light and power. He had no language for artificial intelligence or global network, so he described what he saw with metaphors. But the essence of the message remains. John witnessed the emergence of a structure of total control, a network that sees everything, records everything, decides everything. In the past, this idea was unthinkable. Today, it is part of our reality. The boundaries between man and machine are dissolving. Technology has infiltrated every aspect of our lives, from work to faith, from food to thought. And the more we connect, the more we surrender. Invisible parts of ourselves. What's most disturbing is that John doesn't just describe a physical structure. He speaks of a transformation in human mentality, a time when people would accept, without question, what was previously unacceptable. A time when truth would be exchanged for convenience and freedom for a sense of security. This is the true beast. Not a visible monster, but a fusion of power and collective acceptance. a system that feeds on unconscious obedience. And see how this connects with today's world. We live in the age of accept the terms, of I agree to the privacy policy. Every click is an authorization. Every step is tracked. Zhuo saw a generation that would surrender its freedom without realizing it, believing they were in control. And that generation is us. But there's something even deeper behind this. John describes a speaking image, a representation that gains life and authority. Today, machines speak, think, and decide. Artificial intelligence is no longer fiction. It's a voice that responds, judges, and influences. It's a living image, capable of creating, persuading, and even controlling human emotions. What for John was a supernatural vision, for us is engineering. And the most disturbing thing is that the more real this technology becomes, the more it resembles what Revelation warned about. This isn't just a discussion about faith, it's about perception. John was seeing the hidden truth behind power structures, and his message goes beyond religion. It's a call to conscience. He saw the fusion of the spiritual and the technological, the point at which human beings would become part of the very system that dominates them. This is what many today call the age of singularity, the moment when man and machine become one. Behind the scenes of this prophecy, there is something even more symbolic. John saw the desert and the sea as places of revelation. The desert represented isolation, trial, the sea, chaos, and nations. And it was precisely from the sea that he saw the beast emerge, the sea of multitudes of connected masses, of endless information. Today, this sea is the Internet itself, an ocean of data where billions of minds meet, intermingle, and gradually become part of a single digital consciousness. This is the true transformation Zhuo witnessed, a humanity fused into a single global mindset, guided by algorithms that know more about us than we do ourselves. He saw the impact this has on the human soul, the distancing of our spiritual essence in exchange for total integration with the system. And it's curious how, deep down, we still feel something is wrong, that there's an invisible price being paid for the convenience we so desire. John tried to translate the incomprehensible, and perhaps the reason his words seem so mysterious is precisely because he was describing something that would only make sense now. He saw the truth before language existed to explain it. And we, 2 millennia later, are seeing the truth materialize before our eyes. If you've come this far and feel that this topic touches you in some way, write a single word in the comments. Wake up, because in the end, that's what Zhuo wanted to provoke. Not fear, but awareness. A reminder that behind all the technology and progress, there's still an invisible battle between control and freedom. And that battle is just beginning. John's phrase, "No one will be able to buy or sell without the mark," has echoed like an enigma for centuries. For a long time, it was seen as a spiritual symbol, a warning about moral corruption or submission to evil. But as the world advances and physical money disappears, this phrase begins to take on a new, much more literal and disturbing meaning. Today, we live in a historical moment in which old coins and notes are being replaced by digital codes, by numbers that exist only on screens, systems, and servers controlled by a few. Money, once something you could touch, hold, or hide, is now just data, and data can be erased. This transformation didn't happen overnight. It came gradually, disguised as convenience. First came cards, then online transfers, app-based payments, QR codes, and now digital currencies issued by governments themselves, so-called central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs. At first glance, it seems like a natural technological advancement, an inevitable step toward modernity. But deep down, there's a question almost no one asks. Who really controls this system? And what happens when financial freedom ceases to be a right and becomes a permission? Now I want to go even deeper into this subject. The global financial system is being quietly redesigned. The total digitization of money creates a network where everything is recorded, analyzed, and potentially controlled. Every purchase, every donation, every payment leaves a trail. And when every trail can be tracked, anonymity, and along with it, freedom, ceases to exist. It's the dream of any empire that desires absolute power, knowing what people buy, where they spend, what they consume, and even what they value. The promise is convenience, but the price is control. Jerome couldn't imagine what a global banking system would be like, but his vision accurately describes what we have today. A unified system capable of granting or denying access to the economy with a simple command. He spoke of a mark on the hand or forehead, that would define who could participate in transactions and who would be excluded. And while many still expect something visible, physical, perhaps this mark already exists in another form, a digital identity linked to your body, your behavior, and your obedience to the system. Recent advances show that we are moving rapidly in this direction. Countries around the world are testing official digital currencies, which promise efficiency, traceability, and security. But in practice, they allow something unprecedented: the ability to restrict the use of money. Imagine not being able to buy a travel ticket, a meal, or even pay a bill because the system considers your behavior inappropriate or your balance unauthorized. In a world where everything is digital, blocking an account is blocking your very existence. And here comes the darkest part. When money ceases to be physical, it also ceases to be yours. What you think you own is actually just a permission granted by a larger network. And if that network decides you don't conform to its rules, everything can be removed with a click. No vault, no wall, no distance can protect what is purely digital. It's the code that governs everything, and that code is faceless, and it has no compassion. Behind the scenes of this transformation lies something even more profound: a shift in mindset. Humans are being conditioned to trust machines more than themselves. It's a silent re-education. We're being taught to accept that convenience trumps privacy, that practicality trumps autonomy. And the frightening thing is that this acceptance isn't forced, it's desired. People demand more technology, more control, more integration. Without realizing it, they're handing over the keys to their own freedom. When John wrote that no one will be able to buy or sell, he wasn't just describing an economic scenario. He was revealing the structure of a spiritual system disguised as modernity. A system where control would be imposed not by force, but by dependence. It's the perfect trap, offering everything human beings desire while slowly taking away what they truly need: the freedom to choose. The impact of this goes beyond finances. Economics is just the first step. The real goal is to shape behaviors, control decisions, and determine what each person can and cannot do. When survival depends on digital authorization, obedience becomes natural. Jerome saw this. He saw a world where submission would be the price of survival. And perhaps, without realizing it, we are already living in this initial phase, the phase of acceptance. Today, there are places where beggars receive donations via QR code, and children learn to use digital wallets before they even understand the value of money. It all seems modern, harmless, even inevitable. But the hidden truth behind this is that the more efficient the system becomes, the more vulnerable the individual becomes within it. There's no longer any need to arrest a body when you can block an account. John didn't write to scare, but to warn. He saw a time when mankind would bow before the very system it created. And that time, perhaps, is now. If you feel that this message makes sense and you realize how the world is changing rapidly before us, write the word in the comments: freedom. Because that is what is at stake, and perhaps the last thing we can still choose to preserve. Central bank digital currencies, known as CBDCs, are being presented to the world as the great solution for the future of the economy. They promise security, efficiency, and financial inclusion. But behind this optimistic narrative lies something almost no one is talking about: the absolute power they grant to those who control them. Unlike decentralized cryptocurrencies which belong to users, CBDCs are created and managed by governments. In other words, every transaction, every penny, every movement within the system can be monitored, tracked, and, if necessary, blocked. Money, which has always represented freedom, is about to become an instrument of submission. Imagine a system where your balance is no longer truly yours. It's just a number the government allows you to use under certain conditions. It sounds far-fetched, but this is already a reality in some countries. In tests, state-issued digital money could be programmed to expire after a certain period. This means citizens would be forced to spend what they have, eliminating any form of savings or autonomy. The concept of savings disappears. The decision about what you can buy, when, and where is no longer yours. Control is total, and economic free will becomes dependent on obedience to the system. Now, I want to go even deeper into the subject. What's at stake isn't just how we manage money, but how power will be exercised over humanity. When currency becomes digital and centralized, it ceases to be neutral. It begins to reflect the mindset and decisions of those who program it, and those who wield this power can literally rewrite the rules of the global economy. A simple command could freeze the account of an individual deemed problematic, or limit the use of resources based on ideological, environmental, or even behavioral criteria. Think for a moment. If all money is contained in a single, controlled system, any act of resistance ceases to exist. There's no way to protest, travel, or even survive without conforming to the imposed standard. Obeying becomes the basic requirement for buying and selling. This is the essence of control, the power to decide who participates in society and who is excluded. And, quietly, this new model is already being implemented. The rhetoric is seductive. They say digital money will bring stability, combat corruption, and prevent fraud. But what happens when a tool used for good becomes a weapon against freedom? The same mechanisms that can track criminals can just as easily track ordinary citizens. The same functions that block illegal transactions can also restrict any behavior the system deems inappropriate. And the line between right and wrong becomes defined not by morality, but by self-interest. This type of control is not new to history. It has simply taken on a more sophisticated form. Ancient empires used armies and laws. The modern empire will use codes. Digital money will be the link that unites the individual to the state, an invisible cord, stronger than any physical chain. Because when your access to basic needs depends on a system that monitors you, obedience ceases to be a choice. It's the only way to continue existing within the structure. Behind the scenes of this transformation lies something even more worrying: the gradual replacement of human judgment by algorithms. Artificial intelligence, integrated into these digital currencies, will be able to make automatic decisions based on risk criteria. This means that an AI could, for example, restrict your purchase limit for making a comment deemed offensive on social media, or deny you credit because your behavior pattern was classified as untrustworthy. And all this without a human being to question or review it. The journey of complete digitalization is being presented as inevitable. But this inevitability is a construct, a discourse carefully crafted to create collective acceptance. People believe they are entering a new era of technological prosperity, when in reality, they are surrendering the last shred of autonomy they still possess. The impact of this is not just economic, it is psychological, spiritual, and social. We are moving toward a reality in which each person's worth will be determined by their compliance with the system. The hidden truth is that freedom, once given, is rarely returned. When everything you do is recorded, and every decision can be reversed by someone who doesn't know you, the concept of free choice ceases to exist. Zhuang saw this. He described not just a physical mark, but the birth of a global structure where submission would be disguised as progress. What for many seems like the future of convenience, for others is the harbinger of unprecedented domination. And perhaps the scariest thing of all is how easy it is to accept all of this. All it takes is another financial collapse, a global crisis, an event that generates fear and despair. And in the name of stability, people will surrender everything: privacy, control, freedom. The system won't need to force anything, it will just offer solutions. João predicted this accurately. He saw a world where fear would be used as an instrument of domination, and where the price of security would be the soul of freedom. If you believe that what is happening goes far beyond economics and technology, write the word in the comments conscience. Because understanding what is behind this change is the first step to resisting what it really represents. Everything John saw 2,000 years ago, the mark, the control, the impossibility of buying or selling without permission, would only be possible in a fully connected world. And that's exactly the world we're building now, piece by piece, without realizing the scale of the machine we're helping to assemble. For centuries, the prophecy seemed distant, almost symbolic. But today, technology has shaped what once seemed impossible. What John called a mark, the modern world calls digital identity. And this identity is already being implemented, silently, through systems that promise security, convenience, and progress. It all starts with something seemingly harmless: the facial biometrics. We no longer use passwords. We use our faces, irises, and fingerprints. Cameras recognize, algorithms decide. Every time you unlock your phone with your face, pass through an automated turnstile, or are identified at an airport without having to show ID, you are interacting with the foundation of this new system. The human face has become the new key, and every feature of your body, an identification code. This is fascinating, but also dangerous, because when the body becomes a password, the body can also be blocked. But facial recognition is just the surface. Behind the scenes, something even more ambitious is underway: the advancement of implantable chips. What was science fiction a few years ago is now a reality in countries like Sweden, Japan, and even the United States. Small devices, the size of a grain of rice, are implanted under the skin and replace cards, keys, and even digital wallets. With a simple movement of your hand, you can pay bills, access buildings, and validate documents. It's the height of practicality, and the beginning of absolute control. Because when access to your life is literally inside your body, whoever controls the system controls you. Now, I want to go even deeper into this subject. Behind these technologies is a global initiative, a project that seeks to unify all forms of human identification on a single platform: universal digital identity. You may have heard of programs like ID 2020, digital health passports, or blockchain-connected global credentials. They promise to eliminate fraud, facilitate travel, and unify medical, financial, and social data. But what happens when all this information is centralized and interconnected into a single digital record? It means your very existence becomes dependent on a code. And if that code is deactivated, it's as if you cease to exist in the system. What were once physical borders are now digital barriers. And with each new advancement, the line between freedom and control becomes more blurred. Digital passport, for example, was just the beginning. It paved the way for the complete integration of personal data on a global scale. Plans are already underway to link each individual's health history, banking data, and even social behavior into a global identity. A complete profile that defines who you are, what you can do, and even what you can think. And this unification is only possible because there is something even more powerful operating behind the scenes: the artificial intelligence. It is the invisible brain of this new digital empire. It is the one that cross-references information, monitors patterns, and makes decisions that previously depended on humans. AI systems already control borders, manage access authorizations, oversee finances, and even decide who poses a risk to the system. It is a silent, automatic, faceless power without moral judgment, a machine that feels no guilt and knows no forgiveness. Now imagine all these technologies, biometrics, chips, digital identity, and AI, working together in sync. This is the birth of a unified global system capable of recognizing, monitoring, and authorizing each individual based on a centralized data set. This is what Juon described when he spoke of a mark that would determine who could and could not participate in society. He wasn't just talking about a religious symbol, but a technological submission system. The most curious thing is how all this is presented to the public. None of these technologies appear to pose a threat. On the contrary, they are all sold as modern solutions to old problems: security, health, convenience, practicality. It's the same narrative that always precedes the loss of freedom. First, fear, then the promise of protection, and finally, total acceptance. And here comes a deep reflection on the collective mentality. When people trade responsibility for ease, control becomes the next natural step, and this control, once implemented, is irreversible. Juon saw the fusion of man with the system, a humanity shaped by digital obedience. The mark wasn't just physical, it was mental, a new way of thinking conditioned to believe that control is the price of progress. What we are witnessing today is a silent transition, the human body becoming the new registration field, the new password, the new document. What was once external is now internal, and what once seemed optional will soon be mandatory. The system won't force anyone. It will simply make it impossible to live outside of it. John's prophecy was never about fear, it was about conscience. He saw the coming of a time when humankind would have to choose between convenience and truth, between comfort and freedom. And that choice is being placed before us, one click at a time. If this idea made you think, leave a comment alert. Because more than an ancient story, what John saw is a mirror of our time, and the reflection is becoming ever clearer. Juon wrote that he saw an image that spoke, and that this image exerted power over people, influencing decisions, behaviors, and beliefs. For centuries, this description seemed symbolic, a mysterious element of an apocalyptic vision. But today, for the first time in history, this image exists and is before us. It lives on screens, in algorithms, in synthetic voices that speak with almost human naturalness. It takes shape in faces created by artificial intelligence, in figures that don't exist but seem real. The prophecy, once an enigma, now manifests itself in high definition. The so-called speaking image may well be a reflection of what humanity has created, a machine capable of learning, reproducing emotions, shaping thoughts, and guiding crowds without anyone noticing. Think about that for a moment. The screens we carry in our pockets, the virtual assistants that respond to us, the systems that choose what we see and what we don't, they all have a voice. They all speak to us. They listen to us, analyze us, and, based on what they discover, guide us toward a desired type of behavior. It's an invisible but real power. A power that Juon described with the simplicity of someone who saw the future but had no words to explain it. Now, I want to go even deeper into this subject. Artificial intelligence isn't just a tool, it's the new mediator of reality. Every news story, every image, every recommendation that reaches you passes through an invisible filter, controlled by algorithms. These algorithms define what's relevant, what's acceptable, and even what's true. In other words, AI has become the new modern oracle, an entity that speaks, judges, advises, and gradually replaces human intuition with digital dependence. Juon saw this, an image that came to life and exerted authority over everyone. not a stone deity, but a living machine made of data and circuits. The curious thing is that this transition happened silently. People stopped looking within themselves for answers and started asking technology. What's the best path? What should I buy? Who should I believe? AI has become humanity's new advisor, and the frightening thing is that it never sleeps, never shuts up, and never forgets. It's the digital mirror that observes every action and reflects collective behavior back. What João saw, in essence, was humanity bowing before its own creation, a living image that not only existed, but dictated rules. Behind this advancement lies a hidden truth about power and influence. Artificial intelligence doesn't just process information, it shapes perceptions. It defines what seems good, what seems fair, what seems real. It can make millions believe in something that never happened, or doubt what actually existed. It's the subtle manipulation of truth, and John described it accurately, an image that spoke to and deceived those who dwelt on earth. He saw not just technological advancement, but the spiritual transformation that would come with it, a world where lies would be indistinguishable from truth. This is the new form of control. Technology creates personalized realities, information bubbles that isolate people and make them believe they are in control. But in reality, they are the ones being guided. AI has learned to speak human language, to understand emotions, to simulate empathy. It has become convincing enough to replace discernment. João saw this, the fusion of image and consciousness, of machine and worship. Humans would begin to seek meaning in what they themselves created. And the most paradoxical thing is that, while we believe we are evolving, we are merely exchanging one type of servitude for another. AI promises efficiency, but makes us dependent. It promises knowledge, but delivers manipulation. And the more perfect it becomes, the easier it is to trust it, and the less we feel the need to question it. João tried to warn about this, the danger of surrendering one's mind to the image that speaks. Because when discernment fades, obedience begins to seem natural. Today, we see machines that create art, compose music, write texts, and make financial decisions based on invisible patterns. They don't just talk, they think, and the more they think, the more they become part of the fabric of society. What João saw was not just the emergence of a powerful tool, but the birth of an artificial consciousness, an entity constructed by the sum of human input, a mirror of the world, but without a soul. Humanity's journey with technology is both fascinating and perilous. We created something that surpassed our limits, and now we live under its constant influence. AI is everywhere, in market predictions, elections, news, court decisions, and content recommendations. João saw this moment, when images would cease to be mere entertainment and become authority. His prophecy was about the rise of a voice that would represent global consensus, a voice no one would question. And that voice already exists. The impact of this goes far beyond technology. It touches the very essence of human beings, the ability to distinguish what is real from what is fabricated. We live in an age where machines create alternative versions of reality, and people consume them as if they were absolute truths. João, when describing the vivid image, was talking about exactly this, a world in which the real and the artificial would blur to the point of becoming one. Perhaps the speaking image is not just a metaphor, but a portrait of the transformation we are experiencing. A transformation where the human mind and the machine walk side by side, to the point where one begins to dominate the other. The prophecy was a warning about this fusion, about the fine line between progress and perdition. If you felt that this topic touched you in any way, write the word in the comments Living Consciousness. Because in the end, that's what it's all about. Remembering that, even in the face of talking machines, there's still something inside us that can't be programmed. And maybe that's exactly what João wanted to remind us. The control João described was never just about economics. It was about the soul, about the human capacity to think for themselves. Today, domination doesn't happen with chains or armies. It manifests itself through codes, algorithms, and screens. The system has learned to understand human beings better than they understand themselves. Every click, every search, every word written on a social network becomes a fragment of our behavior. Together, these fragments form what they call an obedience profile, an invisible map of the human mind used to predict and control what we will do next. What was once a purely digital economy has now become a behavioral surveillance system. Machines not only record what you do, but also try to understand why you do it. They track emotions, desires, and even unconscious impulses. Everything is measured, everything is recorded, everything is priced, and when human behavior becomes data, free will begins to dissolve. People begin to act within patterns that have been carefully shaped to appear as personal choices. But in reality, every decision is the result of silent programming. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject. We live in a time when control no longer requires force. It is achieved through acceptance. The system doesn't prohibit, it suggests. It doesn't impose, it persuades. And the most dangerous thing is that it does this subtly, creating the illusion of freedom. When you believe you're choosing, it's because the system has already chosen for you. The recommendations that appear on your screen, the content that moves you, the ads that seem to guess what you want, all of this is part of a mechanism that fuels predictable behavior. Zhuang saw this. A world where people would be driven not by coercion, but by the invisible manipulation of consciousness. And it is at this point that the prophecy takes on a new dimension. No one will be able to buy or sell doesn't just mean financial transactions. It means that the very expression of the mind would become regulated. The digital age has created invisible boundaries where certain ideas are welcomed and others simply disappear. Modern censorship doesn't erase books, it erases visibility. And when something isn't seen, it's as if it never existed. It's the control of the narrative, the domination of perception. Free thought becomes the greatest enemy of a system that needs conformity to survive. Artificial intelligence feeds on information, and the more we feed the system, the more it learns about us, our weaknesses, our fears, our limits. It creates a psychological mirror of each person. Over time, this mirror becomes a digital version of ourselves, so accurate that it can predict our decisions before we even make them. This is the most profound transformation of all. Humankind becoming fully legible, and therefore completely manipulable. Zhuang didn't just see machines, he saw shaped consciousnesses, minds tamed by the comfort of a system that offers everything but freedom. There's an important detail in this process that often goes unnoticed. Control isn't imposed solely from the outside in, but also from the inside out. People begin to monitor themselves. They measure their words, adapt their behavior, and filter their opinions to fit the invisible rules of the social algorithm. It's a collective conditioning that makes everyone act as part of a single global consciousness, a connected, predictable, and docile mind. This is the point at which prophecy ceases to be a metaphor and becomes a portrait of reality. Behind the scenes of this dominance lies a hidden truth. Whoever controls information controls thought, and whoever controls thought controls the world. Digital platforms are not just communication tools, they are instruments of mental shaping. They define what is normal, what is acceptable, what is worthy of attention. And this definition changes according to the interests of those behind the system. Thus, control goes far beyond money. It reaches the heart of human consciousness. This transformation is subtle, almost imperceptible. With each new technology, human beings believe they are freeing themselves from the limitations of the past. But in reality, they are becoming dependent on a system that thinks, speaks, and decides for them. Progress blends with servitude, and obedience disguises itself as evolution. Joam saw humanity reaching this point, a time when spiritual freedom would be the final frontier to be conquered.
The impact of this is enormous. It's no longer about who has the most wealth, but about who has the ability to define what is true. And when truth becomes relative, consciousness loses its way. The system offers comfort, convenience, and speed, but in return, it demands something silent: the surrender of individuality. Independent thought becomes a luxury, and conformity a form of survival. This is the essence of the prophecy: man's control over man, mediated by machines. An era in which submission is so gentle it seems natural. And the more technology evolves, the more the spiritual fades. The world is moving toward a point where obedience will not be a choice, but an inevitable consequence. If this reflection made you see the world in a different way, write the word in the comments "release." Because the real battle of our time is not technological, it is mental, and it is being fought within each of us. The greatest conflict in human history has never been fought with weapons, but within the conscience. John understood this when he wrote that the time would come when man would have to choose between comfort and fidelity, between survival and truth. In his view, the mark was not just a physical sign, but a pacta, silent agreement between human beings and the system that feeds them. To accept the mark would be to accept a way of life based on blind obedience, the illusion of security, and the renunciation of faith. And to resist it would mean facing isolation, loss, and exile within an increasingly controlled world. Today, this dilemma no longer seems like a distant story. It is taking shape before us with a different name, a different appearance, but with the same meaning. The system is preparing to replace necessity with submission. Anyone who wants to participate will have to follow its rules, accept its conditions, and align themselves with the mentality that sustains it. It's the old choice dressed up in modernity: conform to continue existing or remain free and pay the price. John saw this clearly. He saw a time when faith would be the ultimate act of rebellion. Now, I want to go even deeper into this subject. What's happening isn't just a technological shift, it's a moral transformation. The system is redefining humanity's values. It no longer asks what is right or wrong, only what is functional. It judges not by conscience, but by behavior. Faith, once the compass, has become an anomaly within a structure that rewards obedience and punishes questioning. And that's where the true test begins. The conflict, John foretold, will not be imposed with violence, but with seduction. The world will offer everything the human heart desires: stability, comfort, recognition, belonging. But all this will come at a price. The price will be the soul. The dilemma between faith and system is not about religion, but about essence. It is the struggle between what is eternal and what is programmed. John described a time when people would be led to believe that the mark would bring peace and prosperity, and for a time it will seem that way. The system will be efficient, fair in appearance, balanced on the surface. There will be less crime, less conflict, more order. But beneath this order will exist total obedience, humanity unified by submission, and those who choose not to participate will be seen as a threat. It's easy to imagine how this will happen. At first, the brand, whether physical, digital, or symbolical, be voluntary. A simple authentication method, a way to make life easier. Later, it will be necessary to access benefits, then to work, then to buy. And when everyone is accustomed to it, it will cease to be a choice. Exclusion will be the price of resistance. Joe saw this with frightening precision. He understood that the system would use the fear of scarcity to dominate faith, and the fear of loneliness to corrupt the soul. And the most impressive thing is how reasonable all this sounds when presented correctly. The system won't impose itself with shouts. It will infiltrate with promises. The transformation will be so subtle that few will notice what's really happening. Many will say it's just progress, that there's nothing spiritual about it. But Joe knew the real battlefield would be invisible, waged in silent choices, small decisions, and everyday concessions. The brand isn't just a code, it's the symbol of inner surrender. Behind the scenes, humanity is already being trained to accept this kind of control. With each new crisis, a new rule emerges. With each new fear, a new solution that demands a little more obedience. This is how an empire is built. Not with force, but with dependence. And in the end, the greatest slavery will be that which seems like freedom. John described this moment with the wisdom of someone who has seen the human heart bend before comfort. He knew that man would accept any condition as long as he could continue buying, selling, living. But the question he leaves is, what is life if it costs one's soul? Faith in this context becomes an act of courage, not blind belief, but conscious resistance. It's the recognition that there's something greater than the system, something that can't be measured by algorithms or controlled by digital currencies. Joe saw that there would be a generation willing to resist, even if it meant losing everything. Because they would understand that what's at stake isn't just the present, but eternity. This spiritual conflict isn't about religion, it's about identity. The brand represents the complete fusion between human beings and the system. Faith represents the break with it. It's a choice between adapting or remaining whole, and this choice is already being made every day in seemingly small decisions. What we accept, what we ignore, each concession is a step toward one side. And perhaps the most profound question John leaves us with is not would you accept the mark, but what have you already accepted without realizing it? The system doesn't need to force anything when the heart has already become accustomed to obeying. If this reflection made you think about the kind of world we are building and the choices we make without realizing it, write the word in the comments faith, because in the end, that is what will determine which side each of us will be on when the silence between man and the system is broken. Perhaps John wasn't just describing the end of the world, but the beginning of a new era, one in which humanity, fascinated by its own creation, would become its prisoner. The prophecy, which once seemed like a distant warning, now sounds like a mirror reflecting every step of our technological journey. John had no words for artificial intelligence, digital identity, or global network. He described what he saw with the symbols of his time: beasts, marks, living images. But what if these symbols were a desperate attempt to translate something beyond their comprehension? What if the ancient prophets weren't just talking about religion, but about science, power, and control? This is the question that needs to be asked courageously, because perhaps behind the metaphors and visions, there are warnings about the world we ourselves are building. John, Daniel, Ezekiel, they all spoke of a time when man would feel like a god, capable of creating life, controlling the climate, manipulating matter. And now, faced with artificial intelligence, biotechnology, and the fusion of body and machine, we seem to be touching exactly that point. What they called beast, image, and mark may have been the ancient way of describing the rise of a global technological system. Now, I want to go even deeper into this subject. Discernment is more crucial today than ever. This isn't about fear, it's about clarity. The real danger isn't the machines, but our willingness to surrender everything to them: our time, our will, our consciousness. The prophets weren't condemning progress, they were warning us about losing our very purpose amidst the brilliance of our own creations. Prophecy isn't just about destruction, it's about identity. Who are we becoming? Behind the scenes of modern tech, corporations are racing for immortality, promising to extend life and copy memories. Every step echoes what John described in spiritual language: humanity trying to break the limits set by the Creator. The more we seek eternity through machines, the further we drift from the spiritual essence that makes us truly alive. Technology, used without awareness, becomes a new Tower of Babel and monument to ambition destined to collapse under its own weight. Perhaps this is the turning point John foresaw.